I never thought that one day my entire life would come crashing down, not because of a stranger, but because of the woman I had loved and trusted for over 30 years. I used to think loyalty was built with time, that the longer you stayed with someone, the stronger your bond became. But I was wrong. Sometimes time only hides the cracks until something finally forces them open. My name is David. I'm 58 years old, a man who believed he had everything a person could ask for: a stable marriage, 2 grown children, a comfortable home, and a partner who had stood by my side since college. My wife, Linda, was my high school sweetheart. We built a life together from nothing, struggled through our 20s, and finally reached a point where we could relax and enjoy what we had worked so hard for. At least that's what I thought. Everything started to unravel the year our best friends, Mark and Julia, passed away in a tragic car accident. It was one of those moments that changes you forever. They had a daughter, Emily, just 16 at the time. Linda and I had been close to Mark and Julia for decades. We went on vacations together, celebrated birthdays, shared every milestone. When they died, it felt only natural that we'd take Emily in. She had no one else. I couldn't imagine her being sent off to distant relatives she barely knew. At first, Linda agreed without hesitation. She even comforted Emily like she was her own. But I noticed something shift soon after Emily moved in. Linda's patience started to wear thin. She complained about the extra groceries, the noise, the laundry, the money we spent on her schooling. I tried to understand. Grief affects people differently, but what I saw in Linda wasn't grief. It was resentment. Emily, on the other hand, was quiet and respectful. She helped around the house, kept her grades up, and tried her best not to burden us. I could see she was hurting. But she carried herself with strength that impressed me. Sometimes I'd sit with her and tell her stories about her parents, how Mark once broke his leg trying to teach me to ski, or how Julia once made a disaster of Thanksgiving dinner. Emily would smile through her tears, and I'd feel like maybe, just maybe, we were helping her heal. But to Linda, every one of those moments seemed to irritate her. She'd roll her eyes when she saw us talking, mutter things like, "You're coddling her too much," or "She needs to learn to stand on her own." I didn't think much of it at first. I figured it was her way of coping, maybe jealousy that I was giving someone else attention. But the truth ran much deeper. One evening, I overheard Linda on the phone. She was talking to our daughter, Sarah. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words froze me in place. "I don't know why your father insists on wasting money on that girl," she said. "She's not our responsibility. We barely have enough for ourselves, and he's acting like some hero." That hit me hard. We were not struggling financially. I had worked hard all my life, and our retirement fund was stable. So why was she lying? Why was she pretending we were barely scraping by? As time passed, I started noticing small things: missing amounts from our joint account, secret calls at odd hours, sudden shopping sprees. When I asked Linda about them, she brushed it off, saying she needed some joy after losing our friends. I wanted to believe her. After 32 years of marriage, you don't jump to conclusions easily. You try to find reasons, excuses, anything that allows you to keep believing. But things reached a breaking point the day I came home early from work. I had forgotten a set of documents for a client meeting, so I returned around 2 p.m. The house was quiet, but Linda's car was in the driveway. I called her name, but there was no answer. As I walked upstairs, I heard faint laughter coming from our bedroom. My heart started pounding. For a second, I told myself it was the TV. Maybe she was on a call. But as I reached the door, I heard a voice, a man's voice. I stood frozen, listening. "You worry too much," the man said, laughing softly. "He'll never suspect a thing." And then Linda's voice, familiar, and yet suddenly foreign. "I know, but if he finds out before the money's transferred, we're done for." I felt my entire body go cold. Money transferred? What money? I didn't open the door right away. I stepped back quietly, trying to process what I'd just heard. My first thought wasn't even that she was cheating, it was that she was plotting something, some financial betrayal. But when I finally pushed the door open, I realized it was both. Linda was in bed with another man. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I just stood there, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The man jumped up, panicking, grabbing his clothes. Linda went pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The silence between us was deafening. I turned and walked out. She followed me downstairs, begging me to listen, saying it wasn't what it looked like, the oldest, most pathetic excuse known to humankind. I didn't respond. I just sat in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. Our wedding picture, our children's graduations, the trip we took to Italy. Every memory suddenly felt tainted. After a long pause, I asked one question. What did you mean about the money being transferred? That's when she broke down. Through tears and half-truths, the entire story came spilling out. She had been having an affair with a man named Eric, someone she met through a real estate investment group online. Apparently, he had convinced her that if she moved some of our savings into a joint account for business, they could double the returns. In reality, it was all a scam. And she wasn't just cheating on me. Emotionally, she was helping drain our savings behind my back. I sat there in disbelief, realizing that the woman I had trusted for over 3 decades had been planning to leave me once the transfer was complete. Her affair wasn't just emotional, it was financial, calculated, and cruel. That night I packed a bag and left. I stayed at a motel for a few days, replaying everything in my mind. I thought about the years of loyalty, the sacrifices, the shared dreams. And then I thought about Emily, the girl we had promised to protect. I couldn't abandon her, not now. But how could I go back to that house? When I finally returned, Linda was gone. She had taken her things and, from what I later found, also emptied our joint account. The betrayal cut deeper than I could describe. I wasn't just angry. I was broken. Not because I lost money, but because I lost faith in the person I thought would stand beside me till the end. But this story doesn't end there. What Linda didn't know was that I wasn't as naive as she believed. She thought I would sit back and let her walk away with everything. She thought I'd crumble under the weight of heartbreak. She was wrong. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't end with tears, it ends with justice. And I was about to make sure she faced every ounce of the pain she had caused me. The following weeks were some of the darkest days of my life. I woke up every morning feeling like I'd lost not only my wife but my sense of identity. For 32 years, everything I did revolved around Linda, our home, our family, our dreams. Now all of it felt like a lie. I went through the motions, work, meals, sleep, but inside I was empty. I tried to tell myself to move on, to let karma deal with her. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that scene again, Linda with that man laughing, whispering about the money they were stealing from me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. She thought I'd never find out. She thought I'd stay the same mild-mannered husband who ignored the warning signs. But she underestimated one thing: I wasn't done yet. My first step was to secure what was left of our finances. I went to the bank and froze all shared accounts. Linda had already taken a large chunk, but not everything. Thankfully, some investments were under my name only: retirement funds, property deeds, insurance. I also met with a lawyer who advised me to quietly gather proof before confronting her legally. And that's exactly what I did. I started tracing the money trail. Every transfer she made, every suspicious withdrawal, every digital footprint. I hired a private investigator, not for revenge at first, but to protect myself. What he uncovered, however, changed everything. Linda wasn't just cheating with one man. She was involved with a small circle of so-called investors, led by Eric, the same man from our bedroom. They were running a fraudulent scheme, convincing people to pool resources for high-end property flips. It was a pyramid of lies, and Linda, in her greed, had become a willing participant. She wasn't just a victim of a con. She was helping con others, using my name and credibility as bait. The investigator showed me screenshots of messages, emails, and financial records. In one message, she bragged to Eric that I was too soft to notice anything, and that once she had full control of our assets, she'd finally live free. Reading those words made my blood boil, but instead of confronting her emotionally, I made a decision. I would make her pay, not with anger, but with precision. I gathered every document, every bank record, every piece of evidence. Then I started building a timeline of her activities. I also contacted a few of the people she'd scammed through that investment group. Some of them had already lost thousands. When I showed them proof that Linda and Eric were part of it, they were furious. Together we decided to take legal action. But before that, I wanted to play my own card. I wanted Linda to feel what betrayal really meant. About 2 months after she left, Linda reached out to me. Her tone was sweet, apologetic, fake as ever. "David, I made a mistake," she said over the phone. Eric wasn't who I thought he was. He took the money and disappeared. "Please, I need help." I almost laughed. She wasn't calling because she cared. She was calling because her scam had backfired. Karma had struck faster than I expected. But I played along. I told her I was willing to meet and talk. She suggested we meet at a cafe downtown. When she walked in, she looked different, disheveled, anxious, desperate. Gone was the woman who once boasted about living free. Now she looked like someone who'd been chewed up and spit out by her own greed. "I lost everything," she said, her voice trembling. "He took the money, David, all of it. I have nothing left." I stared at her, pretending to show sympathy. Inside, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "That's terrible, Linda," I said softly. "But you know what's worse? You didn't just lose your money, you lost your soul." She tried to explain herself, saying she was tricked, that she never meant to hurt me. I let her talk, nodding calmly, watching her dig deeper into her own lies. Then I dropped the bomb. "I know everything," I said. "About the affair. About the fraud. About how you used my name to scam people." Her face went pale. She froze, her hands trembling. "David, please. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You thought you could take everything from me. But now you're the one who's lost it all." She begged me not to go to the police, saying it would ruin her life. But I was past pity. She didn't think twice about ruining mine. I stood up, tossed a few bills on the table for my coffee, and said, "You made your choices. Now you live with them." 2 days later, my lawyer filed charges: financial fraud, embezzlement, identity misuse. The other victims did the same. The investigation picked up fast because I had already handed over all the evidence neatly organized. Within weeks, authorities froze her accounts and launched a full inquiry into the entire group. Eric vanished, of course. People like him always do. But Linda wasn't as smart. She had left enough paper trails to tie her directly to the crimes. Watching her get arrested was surreal. A part of me still remembered the woman I once loved, standing in handcuffs, crying as the officers read her rights. But any sympathy I had evaporated when I remembered how easily she betrayed me. During the court proceedings, Linda tried to paint herself as a victim. Her lawyer claimed she was manipulated, that she didn't know the scheme was illegal, but the evidence was too strong. Messages, transactions, witnesses all pointed to her active involvement. When the verdict came, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud and theft. Eric was still missing, but at least justice was served for my part. The judge also ordered restitution for the victims, including me. But even after the trial, I didn't feel happy. Justice doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it just leaves a quiet emptiness where anger used to live. I focused on rebuilding my life. Emily was still living with me, finishing her senior year of high school. She had been my light during the chaos. Despite everything, she stayed kind, patient, and supportive. She often told me I deserved better, that I shouldn't blame myself for what Linda did. And she was right. One evening, Emily handed me a small notebook. Inside were letters she had written to her late parents, expressing her gratitude that I had taken her in. "You gave me a home when I had no one," she wrote. "You reminded me that not everyone leaves when things get hard." Those words hit me harder than anything else. It was in that moment I realized that while I had lost a wife, I had gained something even more meaningful, a purpose. I wasn't alone anymore. I still had someone who looked up to me, someone who believed in goodness even after so much loss. Slowly, I began to heal. I sold the house that Linda and I had shared. It was full of ghosts I didn't want to see anymore, and moved to a smaller place near the coast. Emily joined college soon after, and I promised to support her education no matter what. Life started to feel normal again, peaceful even, until one day, about a year later, I received a letter in the mail from Linda. She was being released early for good behavior. The letter wasn't angry or apologetic, it was pitiful. She claimed she had changed, that she wanted to make amends, that she still loved me in her own way. She even asked if we could talk once she got out. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because some people don't deserve closure. Some people need to live with the silence they created. But what Linda didn't know was that her actions had consequences far beyond what she imagined, and those consequences were about to come knocking in ways neither of us expected. When Linda's letter arrived, I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her handwriting looked shaky, unfamiliar, as if life had already worn her down. A part of me thought about throwing it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know what kind of woman she had become after all that time in prison. Inside, her words were drenched in guilt and desperation. She talked about finding faith, understanding her mistakes, and wanting forgiveness. She said prison had changed her, that she'd realized how much she'd taken for granted, and that all she wanted now was a chance to make things right. She ended with a plea. I don't expect you to love me again, David, but please don't hate me forever. For a moment I felt a flicker of something, not love, not sympathy. Maybe just the ghost of the man I used to be, the one who believed in second chances. But then I thought about everything she had done, the lies, the affair, the theft, the betrayal of trust that took me decades to build. Forgiveness wasn't something I could just hand over like a favor. It had to be earned, and she hadn't earned anything except the silence she was living with. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. People like Linda never really change. They just adapt. They find new ways to manipulate, new stories to tell. So when I heard she'd been released early and had moved back into our old town, I kept my distance. I told Emily about it, just so she wouldn't be caught off guard. She was in college by then, more mature, stronger, and she hated Linda for what she had done. She doesn't deserve even a word from you, she told me. I agreed. For the next few months, life went on quietly. I volunteered at a local youth center, started fishing again, spent weekends visiting Emily at her dorm. It felt peaceful, almost like a second chance at life. I had let go of anger, or at least most of it. But fate wasn't done yet, because one evening Linda showed up at my doorstep. It was raining and I heard the knock before I saw her. When I opened the door, she stood there, drenched, tired, holding a small duffel bag. Her eyes were hollow, her face pale. For a second, it felt like seeing a ghost. David, she whispered. Please, just listen. My first instinct was to close the door. But then I remembered who I was. I wasn't going to stoop to her level. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch, shivering, glancing around as if expecting to see her old life still here. But it was gone. The furniture, the pictures, everything that once symbolized us. She looked small, almost defeated. I don't have anyone left, she said quietly. Sarah doesn't talk to me. Our son won't answer my calls. I don't even have a place to stay. I folded my arms. That's the price of choices, Linda. You made yours. She looked up at me, tears forming. I know I ruined everything, but I swear I'm not the same person. I just need a chance to rebuild, to start again. There was a silence. The old me might have offered help, maybe even forgiveness, but I wasn't that man anymore. Still, something about her desperation made me pause. I didn't trust her, but I wasn't cruel either. I told her I'd pay for 1 week at a motel, just to give her time to figure things out. She cried, maybe out of shame, maybe relief. Thank you, she whispered. But deep down I had a feeling there was more to her visit than she let on. I was right. A few days later I got a call from the bank. Someone had tried to access one of my accounts. The same old joint one I had long closed. The attempt was flagged under Linda's name. I was stunned, not because she tried, but because she still thought she could get away with it. I didn't react immediately. Instead, I decided to let the trap tighten. I called my lawyer and told him everything. He suggested we quietly monitor her movements. Since she was still on probation, any fraudulent activity could send her straight back to prison. We coordinated with the authorities to keep watch. Meanwhile, Linda kept up the act. She'd call occasionally saying she was looking for work, that she was trying to do better. I played along, polite but distant. She didn't know I already knew what she was up to. The more she lied, the easier it became to let go of any remaining guilt I had for what was coming next. One evening I received an unexpected visit, and from a young man who introduced himself as Ryan. He said he'd been helping Linda with business opportunities. Immediately, I knew where this was going. She had found another target, another man to con. I listened carefully, pretending to be neutral. He explained that Linda told him she needed help accessing some old funds that were tied up in my name. She had spun some story about me being her abusive ex, who had frozen her assets out of spite. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. I let Ryan finish his story. Then I calmly showed him the court papers from her previous case. He went pale as he read them. I had no idea, he stammered. I told him not to blame himself. Linda was good at playing the victim. Before leaving, he thanked me and promised he wouldn't get involved with her again. That was the moment I realized Linda hadn't changed at all. Prison hadn't reformed her. It had only sharpened her manipulative skills. So I did what I had to do. I called my contact at the local police and handed over the new evidence. Her bank access attempts, her lies to Ryan, her continued fraud attempts while still under probation. They launched a quiet investigation. Within 2 weeks, Linda was taken in for questioning. This time, she didn't get away with a plea deal. The judge ruled her in violation of her probation, adding another sentence for attempted fraud. The woman who once thought she could outsmart everyone was now facing another 2 years behind bars. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to see it. I had already seen her true face too many times. I heard later that when the verdict was read, she didn't even cry. She just sat there expressionless, as if she finally understood that she had destroyed every bridge she ever had. That night I sat by the window, listening to the sound of the waves crashing outside my coastal home. The air was cool, the moonlight spilling across the floor. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not triumph, not vengeance, just closure. It wasn't the kind of revenge filled with shouting or rage. It was quiet justice, the kind that restores balance to your life. Emily visited the next weekend. We cooked dinner together, laughed about small things, and talked about her plans after graduation. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, kind, strong, independent. Before leaving, she hugged me and said, "You know, Dad, you did the right thing. You didn't let hate define you. You let truth do the work." That moment hit me harder than I expected. She was right. I hadn't destroyed Linda. Linda had destroyed herself. I simply stepped aside and let her choices catch up to her. And in doing so, I found myself again, the man I used to be before the betrayal, before the heartbreak. Months passed and life became beautifully simple. I spent mornings walking along the beach, afternoons reading on the porch, evenings video calling Emily. Sometimes, I still thought about Linda, not with anger anymore, but with a strange sense of distance, like remembering someone from another lifetime. She had been my partner once, the center of my world, but now she was just a name in my story, one that had taught me the hardest lesson of all. Trust is fragile. Love can blind you. But truth always finds a way to reveal itself. In the end, I didn't need revenge to feel whole again. What I needed was peace, and that peace came not from watching Linda suffer, but from finally understanding that I survived her. I rebuilt, I healed, and I lived. And that perhaps is the greatest revenge of all.